All right. Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Cory, and my pronouns are he and him.
My name is David. My pronouns are they, them.
My name is Sarah. My pronouns are she and her.
And it's been an interesting couple weeks. We had the throne speech about a week ago now, a little less than a week ago. And there's been some back and forth about what went on there. And yeah, so there's quite a few stories to cover. So before the show, I
missed you guys.
Yeah. It's been 4 weeks since you've been on.
It wasn't Sarah chasing me away. I just had life stuff get in the way. So
no, fair enough. Yeah. Stuff happens sometimes. Makes it tough to spare the energy to come on a show.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, with the last time we were scheduled, I guess I don't know if this counts as Saskatchewan news or not, but driving back from Saskatoon, and by far the worst I've ever seen that highway been in over a decade of driving it on a very regular basis.
Right.
I drive that highway at least once or twice a month, every month, with the exception of for about that first year of COVID. And I have never in over 10 years seen that road that bad. It took over 4 hours to do what was normally a 2.5 hour drive. So right. I appreciate you guys soldiering on without me.
Well, I'm glad you made it. That's
yes,
the key. Right?
I did not end up in the ditch like well over 24 vehicles that we passed along the way. So at least 24. There were times when I couldn't see the ditch because of the low visibility. So I'm sure there were more off on the side during those stretches as well. So
yeah, we're currently in a bit of a winter storm thing going on today too. And I was supposed to drive to Weyburn to take my daughter and her friends back to Weyburn, and I decided just not to. So they get to skip school tomorrow.
Well, I was thinking about driving to Saskatoon this weekend too, and yeah, this time I was more cautious. I listened to the weather report ahead of time and decided to hunker down with some hot chocolate and popcorn and avoid the roads.
Sure. Good call.
Talking about the weather really isn't Saskatchewan news, though. I guess
it is Saskatchewan current events, but not so much of the
kind of.
Yeah.
Not new current events. Continuing. Ongoing.
Yeah.
Ongoing story for a couple centuries now.
The state of being in Saskatchewan is talking about the weather. All right. So we might as well get on with some stuff. Our first story is the Saskatchewan government discourages the use of a federally funded Canadian anti-hate network toolkit in classrooms. They said that the toolkit does not meet the quality criteria and is not free from bias. I mean, I don't know how much there is to say about this, except that like the bias that they're looking for, it's an anti-white supremacy bias. So I don't know how, obviously that's bad for the Sask party. I don't know. It seemed pretty silly to me.
So I find it funny that like, that's not okay, but your like super biased white paper is fine to be a thing. I mean, I guess it's not a piece of curriculum, but still.
Well, and technically neither is this. This is according to the director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, says this isn't curriculum. It's what is it? It's a resource, an in-class resource, but as a professional development resource, primarily for parents and teachers. It is not curriculum. So it's not like they're teaching kids word for word whatever is in this anti-hate toolkit, right? Like, yeah. I know Samantha Bicotti, president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, says she's surprised that the province is discouraging the use of the toolkit. And she said that like the teachers are highly educated and they're well trained and they know whether or not they want to use this tool in their toolkit or not in their classrooms.
It's the bias is on behalf of the provincial government, who doesn't want this to be a toolkit for teachers and parents, because then everyone will know how bad.
And the idea that anything like can be taught without a bias is ridiculous. Like everything has a point of view. Like just from a study of knowledge, there is no such thing as knowledge that doesn't have a perspective. just by sheer virtue of a human being watching it, presenting it. There are cultural biases steeped into the most neutral of academic subjects. Like math has a cultural bias in it based on what number systems are used, this like the terminology that's used, the prioritization of which fields of mathematics get taught first and which don't, why we teach differential calculus ahead of integral calculus, why we teach calculus ahead of probability. Like all of these things are having a bias to them. And when you get into social sciences or the humanities, there is always going to be a bias, but that doesn't mean you stop teaching it, because there's also like just by sheer virtue of which things you talk about and which things you don't talk about have a bias. This toolkit talks about Saskatchewan in a couple different places, and it talks about the 60s scoop, and it talks about Starlight Tours. Choosing to hide those things from children, choosing to hide those things from students and scholars, which is what our children in schools are, is a bias. Pretending that the Starlight Tours didn't happen is a bias. And teaching that it did happen is a bias as well. You're picking and choosing which things to talk about. So it's not about saying we can try and find some weird, idealized, non-biased perspective. It's about being factual in what we do teach and acknowledging that there's a bias in picking and choosing. And it is important to understand why some of the problematic things that have happened so we can prevent them from happening again.
We got Belgord says the Saskatchewan Ministry of Education has claimed that the Canadian Anti-Hate Network has made, quote, quite controversial statements without any kind of backup or evidence, end quote, in the toolkit. And as far as I can tell, and the director of the Anti-Hate Network says that that's not factual or accurate. There is lots of evidence to back up what they've got in here, and lots of links and information to support what they've provided. So,
yeah. And it's one of these things where I don't like governments suing governments, but at some point you almost, and this isn't put out by the government specifically, I don't believe, the federal government, but like sometimes you almost want someone like Belgord to start, actually bring government officials to court for libel. If you're saying that I don't have proper citation, that's an accusation of failure to provide academic rigor. That's a pretty strong accusation, with no evidence.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So.
Well, and this just speaks to like Saskatchewan, but this is something that isn't it the federal government is offering or recommending? So it's
they were involved in the grant. They gave a grant or something to help fund this.
Yeah. So what are other provinces doing? Is Saskatchewan the only one that's like,
BC says that it's putting in, BC says it's already putting it in on a recommended list, and other provinces are meeting with the Canadian Anti-Hate Network.
Okay.
They say every other province so far has either been neutral to positive. Saskatchewan is the only one that's had a negative response.
Yes. Yeah.
That's it. I'm guessing Alberta is going to have a negative response as well. That's me using my magic psychic powers. So that hasn't actually happened yet. This is through the power of my precognition.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I'm going to make
it
that
just
prediction.
happens that certain provinces have been. Yeah. There's one more point here. He said that Belgord said we don't want this thing to be political. We're kind of disappointed it's become political in Saskatchewan. And I kind of disagree with him on this. Like, this sort of thing is always going to be political. It's just the inherent nature of the system and the white supremacy that exists within our culture. So be it.
And it is naive to think kids aren't being exposed to the opposing point of view. Let's even give every single parent and teacher and whatnot the benefit of the doubt and assume not a single parent in Saskatchewan is promoting white supremacy or racism to their children. By the age of 10, your kids are going to have been on YouTube.
Yeah.
One way or another, your kids will have seen YouTube.
There's lots of white supremacy on YouTube.
It is not possible for that not to happen. Yeah. So if you don't talk to your kids about it, they don't have the tools to rationally dissect it. They don't have the tools to go, fuck no, that's ridiculous. Hopefully your 9-year-old isn't actually saying fuck no, or depending on where your beliefs on swearing are, I'd be fine with it. But, and again, these are tools that come into play that can sort of help provide some defense in school so that it doesn't fall 100% on parent shoulders to provide that inoculation. Yeah. I'd like to think that I've done a good job with my own kids on having some of these things and touch base with them. Like just the other day, I'm like, hey, by the way, do you ever watch Andrew Tate? And my 12-year-old just like, no. Like just the look of abject horror and disgust that I even would think he might was just like, okay, good, I'm doing an okay job. But like that required a lot of work and laying a lot of groundwork. And yeah, parents should be doing tons of that stuff too in the world we live in. But having additional defense against that stuff
it's always good. Yeah.
Is good. It is good to help kids be good at thinking. But that should be one of the things school does. So.
Yeah, that's right. The struggle is real. Concerns deepen for Regina's houseless population. This was what was the date on this? October 24th. So it's quite a while ago now, 2 weeks ago, and it's cold, and our homeless population is higher than it has been in the past, and I'm not sure. I think the city has not done anything to work on it. And I don't get the impression that the province is doing anything. So I don't know where to go with that, but.
Yeah, that's just it. It's like so many of the stories are like, yeah, Saskatchewan's a shithole. Next article, right?
Yeah, like, that's right.
It's still wild that this is an issue, but of course it is, right? Like, when you have a government that does not care, that is squeezing people dry and increasing costs on everything and gutting social programs and all of that, this is the result, right? So, it's horrendous, but not surprising, and also feels kind of hopeless because, the people that are in power are the ones who are best able to fix the situation. And, the people in power are kind of jerks that don't care about people that aren't just like them. So, I mean, kudos to all of the folks that do work in like mobile crisis and stuff like that. I can't imagine how difficult of a job that is. And one of the other articles talking about food bank use being up and all of the other charities and things that are pitching in to help, and it's like they shouldn't have to. That shouldn't have to be.
It's all just Band-Aids, right? Like it's all these are not solutions. They're just.
If people are going to the food bank as a regular means of feeding themselves, that means that you have a systemic problem. That's not, either you need to fund that. You can't rely on everybody else to fix the problem, because when you tax everyone to hell and you make everything more expensive, there's going to be less donations to the food bank. And then, the problem's just going to get worse. It's going to snowball from there. So, it's like at last word, the city was assessing whether there is a need for emergency housing for the winter beyond the province's plan. It's like, probably. Can we just assume probably? But.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm a broken record on this. But what we're doing is also absolutely, utterly stupid from a fiscal responsibility standpoint.
Yeah.
Like, again, I always go back to, even if you don't care, and like the fact that people are going to die, like That is not a question. It is not a matter of if. At this point, it is a matter of how many homeless people will die in Regina this winter, not a matter of if anyone will. It is simply a matter of how many. That should be enough to horrify us into action. But even if it wasn't, the sheer fiscal stupidity of the way we are doing it now should spur us into a housing first solution to this problem.
Yeah.
And so anyone calling themselves a fiscal conservative,
like every
really
single area that has implemented housing first initiatives have seen better health outcomes, employment outcomes, mental health outcomes, life outcomes for the population without housing. But also it has become cheaper. It has saved them money when studied, like every time, without fail, by a large margin. This isn't secret, unknown information. We know this. We know what we're doing is expensive. Treating symptoms rather than solving problems is more expensive. Like even just from a common sense perspective, and none of these people are living in fancy, swanky hotels when they are seeking out support for mobile crisis. But imagine instead of a person living in their own apartment or their own home, living in a hotel, like just even the cost difference of having to provide housing one night at a time, just without even going into the studies, just from a common sense perspective, providing something on a night by night basis is going to be more expensive. And it is unfathomable. And I guess it's not unfathomable because there's this moral outrage that people are willing to literally throw their own money away just to punish people who they think don't deserve care. I guess unconscionable is probably a better word than unfathomable. We don't prioritize housing over band-aids.
The big news of the last 2 weeks, the Sask throne speech and their pledges for legislative changes to defend natural resources. The throne speech referred, of course, back to the white paper, and they're planning to put out, the Saskatchewan First Act and the amending the Saskatchewan Act. And this is the part that gets me. To state that Saskatchewan continues to retain jurisdiction over its natural resources. This is a thing that happens already. This is the way it is. But we have to restate that it continues to retain this. And introducing legislation allowing Saskatchewan to collect corporate income tax and greater control over immigration. And there's other things too. There was discussion in the throne speech about policing and whatnot. And it's the throne speech from the Sask party. It seems like a lot of the same old in a lot of ways, like tough on crime, but also like woe is us because the feds are like targeting us and really like they really want Saskatchewan to fail, supposedly. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, we talked a bit about the white paper last time. It's again just trying to put attention on something else to distract from other nonsense they're doing. It's, like you said, to continue having these rights that you already have. So you're just, it's like a kid yelling. It's like, I demand breakfast. It's like, we're going to get breakfast. It's on the table.
It's on the table already, yeah.
I want 5 bowls of Cheerios. Okay, well, we only have 3. I'm sorry. You're going to have to just do with that. Well, I'm going to write down on this piece of paper that I'm entitled to 5 bowls of Cheerios.
Yeah, regardless of what's available.
Yeah, so I just hate this whole thing. Yeah. Bothers me so much.
Yeah, it's what's the one? Oh, go ahead.
What was it? This idea of defending natural resources is this wacky culmination of rhetoric that has slowly morphed over time. Because now we are literally talking about defending an inanimate object. Like you can make the argument that revenue from natural resources provides this, that, and the other thing. You can make the argument that employment from natural resource extraction feeds families, right? Like you can make the argument that this is a valuable industry because of the things that it does. But even if you support it, I would hope you would have the rational understanding that it is a means to an end, and you are not literally trying to defend a puddle, right?
But I have a friend who owns a corporation that can make money off of that puddle, so I have to defend the puddle.
But like, I guess, and that's why you're obfuscating it, because what you're not defending is a natural resource. You're not defending that, resource underground. You're not defending a natural gas site. Yeah. You're not defending a lump of coal. You're defending the rights for people who own that to profit from that. Yeah. But that doesn't sound great. But like, they've completely abandoned the rhetoric of defending workers and the coal workers, oil rig workers, natural gas workers. And I think, and again, maybe this is just the jaded in me, I think the reason they've stopped the rhetoric of we need to defend our oil and gas workers is as time goes on, shifting jobs into green energy provides more jobs and more revenue for the workers themselves. Like you're giving up, you're trading away 5 oil and gas jobs for 10 wind and solar jobs that pay more, are less dangerous, and provide better social outcomes just by sheer virtue of what you're doing. Yeah. And they're more profitable at this point. Like we've already crossed the tipping point where when you remove subsidies, wind and solar is cheaper than oil and gas. Yeah. The only thing keeping oil and gas afloat is the fact that it is so heavily subsidized in the form of it's essentially being given away. The resource itself is being given by the province to the energy extraction companies. And then we take back a little bit in terms of royalties as when we do so. So we give away $100 and ask for $2 back. Yeah. That's for anyone who tries to nitpick the numbers. Those are random numbers chosen off the top of my head. Don't come back and tell me royalties are more than $2 per $100 of oil extracted. I know that's another tactic, but like if you start focusing on the rhetoric of 10 years ago or 15 years ago when we talked about I heart oil and gas workers, the oil and gas workers themselves, your buddy who goes out to Fort Mac in his F-150, who now is leveraged up to his eyeballs in debt on that F-150 and is struggling because he's not able to go out on the rigs as much as he used to, and the oil prices are lower and all that. If he is retrained to maintain a wind turbine the same way he maintained and learned and was trained on how to maintain a rig, he's going to have a safer job and he's going to make more money and he's going to be overall better off. So you got to start shifting the focus away from that to we need to protect the rock in the ground itself as opposed to protecting the people who pull it out of the ground.
So can we just convince some of Mo's buddies to get into like solar and wind? Because then
they're in there. There's no doubt that they're in there because they can make money off of it, right?
Yes, that's why I'm still not understanding the death grip on clinging to oil and gas so fervently. Like I still don't understand it.
Yeah, it's
because
just
exactly everything David said, right?
I also think part of it isn't even part of it is obviously his buddy making profit off of it. I think part of it though is just it's the team. It's if you can convince people it's us versus them. We're on team lump of rock, and therefore team sunshine and wind is my enemy.
Yeah. Politics has team sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of the energy companies at this point are actually more green than the provincial jurisdictions that they operate in.
Yeah.
That's a low bar,
Right.
but
yeah. Yeah, I
anything
actually.
else from the throne speech itself that we want to touch base on?
Well, I mean, we talked in the past about why is the government running liquor stores, and they are planning not to do this anymore. My only concern is that this is going to put some people out of work, out of good union jobs, but I'm hoping that they will have some way to transition them, other than just layoffs.
All they said was, well, you can get jobs at the private places, and it's like most of those pay, minimum wage and aren't unionized and everything.
Yeah.
So it's not equal. And yeah, it's maybe strange that we're in the selling booze business, but it was still making money from what I saw on on Twitter.
It sure is. And we're still in the selling booze business.
Yes. Still maintaining the wholesale. Yeah.
Because now, once again, we're subsidizing private industry at this point because, like, the province staying in the wholesale part of it means they will continue to keep costs, like the wholesale costs, low for the private retailers. Yeah. So it is at this point, once again, the government providing a service to private corporations for them to profit off.
With no benefit to the workers or anything else, right? So that's what I didn't understand is like, why are they like, we have them fine. That's maybe you've obviously had a conversation on whether the government should be doing that or not, but it's like, why now that you're doing it, why are you stopping that part? Just that part that people have decent employment on, that we make money on, all of that. You either like morally object to government booze and you get out of it entirely, or
you don't
do it in a way that at least helps your people, right? Those revenues go to social programs. You make sure the jobs are well paid, unionized, all that kind of thing. So now it's like, we'll just do the part that helps out the private industry and screws over the workers. It's like, that's on brand.
And it is that weird sort of, I've talked about this before where, conservatives always talk about running government like a business. Imagine if you owned a business where you were a wholesaler, but also had a retail distribution network that you yourself owned that was making money, and you didn't sell the whole thing. You kept the sale business, but didn't keep the retail distribution of your own product. Like you intentionally leverage off the profitable part of your business. That's weird to me. And don't get me wrong. I think if they were to sell off I think we're going to see alcohol prices go up, but I think if you were to sell off the wholesale part of it as well, you'd see alcohol prices go up even more. And I'm glad I get to pay what I pay for liquor. I'm glad it's cheaper here than it probably would be if it was supplied privately. But I'd rather I would rather them get out. Since I've said on this show before, I think government should do things that are necessary. I think there's a lot of things that we currently do as crowns that should probably be just straight up public utilities, and rather than crowns. It's important enough for the government to do it. It should be a utility. Yeah. And if it's not important enough to be a utility, then we can let it be private sector, or we let it be, we go socialism rather than communism and let it be worker-owned cooperatives. I'd be good with that.
Sounds good.
And picking alcohol just sort of when we don't do it with any other industry really seemed, very puritanical. But I did note we're just doing this whole legalized embezzlement thing where we have government just sort of shifting profit into the pockets of companies rather than just letting them actually compete in a free market.
Literally the project of the Sask Party for the whole time they've been in power. Shifting public money into the hands of private.
Yeah, pretty much.
So in the throne speech, there's also a couple things about policing. They talk about reopening the courthouse in Lloydminster and in Weyburn, which is fine, whatever. They did mention the Saskatchewan Marshal Service to work alongside the RCMP as well, which seems like too many cops to me.
And very expensive. I didn't
Yeah.
see it on here, but yeah, I saw an article of like how many millions it'll cost. And just, again, money you could be spending to prevent crime rather than, what we need is more people that are already doing nothing.
Yeah,
we need more
right.
people doing nothing. And we need to pay them a lot of money to do nothing.
Yeah.
And like just knowing how, agencies and things where everybody is kind of protectionist. I don't know how you're not going to have people like stepping on toes, like working alongside the RCMP. Probably not how that's.
There's going to be jurisdiction issues, right? Like,
yeah,
you would think.
And hoarding of information because you don't want the other guys to get the edge on what. Like this happens in any organization. Like even I work at the university. There's little silos everywhere, right? And it's one organization that has a common goal, and there's still some kind of, well, I don't want to do this because I'll step on their toes. So it's like putting that in like a policing framework, knowing the personalities that tend to dominate in the policing line of work. Like, I just don't see this good from like, forget, even if you love cops and like they're the greatest thing ever, just having duplication and redundancy not going to be a good idea.
Yeah. No.
Because of exactly that, territorial nature of things, right?
One of the fascinating things about this throne speech, and really any conservative throne speech, State of the Union, what have you, in the last 20 to 30 years, is that conservatism of the last 20 to 30 years is predicated on this idea that everything is awful right now. Like their entire brand is how horrible everything is.
So let's just make it worse.
But it's this weird dichotomy when like you're the one in charge. Like the Sask Party has been in charge for 14 years?
At least,
like over a decade.
Yeah.
Right? So like you're the one in charge and you took over in a boom time. Like when you took over, we had a surplus. We were running a surplus budget year over year. We had a big rainy day fund built up. The province was increasing population year over year, every year for the few years leading into them taking over. And like then they took over and now 10, 15 years later are complaining how horrible everything is as their brand. And it's just this weird sort of like having to, at one point, everything's great. Like if you read the throne speech, it sounds like it's written by two different people. Because at one point they're like, everything's great. Saskatchewan's wonderful. We're bringing in jobs. We're bringing in projects. Everything's hunky-dory and wonderful. But also we're living in a nightmare hellscape. Like, which... And it's like, our hospitals are overrun. Our streets are lawless. Everything's out of control. But also, there's nothing to worry about with your provincial healthcare system, and we're law and order. Like,
Sask MLA says inviting convicted killer Colin Thatcher to throne speech was, quote, an error in judgment. So he was invited by MLA Lyle Stewart to the throne speech, and obviously it was noticed. I feel like it was intended to be noticed, but that's just me. So everybody's allowed to invite a guest to the throne speech, and this was Lyle Stewart's invite. We've got a couple other stories related to it in that first Mo didn't want to apologize, and then he did apologize. And there's been like a roller coaster of reaction to the Colin Thatcher appearance.
I just love how, like, if this doesn't speak to the Sask Party, this whole Colin was a longtime MLA, and he's a constituent of mine and a friend of mine, and that's why I invited him. It's like, I'm not friends with any convicted murderers. I like to consider myself a good person. I would be concerned if the people running my government were friends with a lot of convicted murderers, and not like, crime of passion, self-defense, just straight up killed his ex-wife because things were going poor, like that kind of thing,
There's a lot there.
Yeah, and everyone's just like, yeah, maybe he shouldn't have been there. How do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Stewart said Thatcher was a fine individual and has had a tough life because of his time in prison. So let's just wrap our heads around that. Being in prison is bad, but we want to make sure we put lots of people in prison for as long as possible.
Right. Yeah, like the tough on crime kind of idea is backwards, right?
Yeah, he's a fine individual, but
all the other people in jail aren't. So naturally we have to abandon them and leave them there. And but this guy, he gets to come and do his thing.
Well, but he's saying he's had a tough life because of his time in prison, meaning time in prison is bad, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you're anybody but a white conservative male. Is that the like just the hypocrisy? And like it's not even hypocrisy. I think it's just they're really just that obtuse that they don't even see that it's hypocrite. You know what I mean? Hypocritical. I don't know.
Well, and I guess one minor, I don't say correction because what you said was correct, but extrapolation or expansion. You referred to Lyle Stewart as an MLA. He was also the legislative secretary in charge of provincial autonomy. So, like, he was the legislative secretary in charge of what Mo has treated as the most important project within his government over the last 6 months. Like, he is not some random backbencher. Like, he was he wasn't a minister, but he was probably as high up as you can be without being a minister. Like, he was a parliamentary secretary, but the parliamentary secretary in charge of Mo's biggest passion project. Like he was the how can we make Trudeau look like a silly goose secretary, right? Like that was his job.
Right. Yeah.
And so Mo should have been aware. Mo would have been aware of this.
He was absolutely aware.
This was not I didn't know who he was bringing. Like Mo knew.
Yeah.
Or if he didn't, that is bizarre levels of being in the dark within your
just own a lack of communication on every level.
Like, what was your purpose in him being there? You can invite a couple people, and like of all the people you chose him, and why? All they're saying is like, well, he was a long-time MLA, right? You're saying, and I guess as progressive conservatives, not Sass Party, same shit, different pile. But you're highlighting the fact that this convicted murderer was a longtime MLA of your party, and inviting him because of that. So you're just, again, further highlighting the fact that your party is kind of rotten and terrible and awful. It's just, it's bizarre. It just...
Some people have said, some people have said that it's intentionally meant to distract, right? I don't know, I can't read the motivations behind people, but it sure seems like this was a move.
Distract or to feed into the anti-SJW, anti-wokeness. We love the liberal tears. Like intentionally, quote unquote, trolling, right? Like it's this thing where it's not about it's the brand isn't about governing; it's about undermining the other guys.
But it is about your own people. Though, like if I was a conservative, why would this be a good thing? Like, conservatives are generally anti-crime and law and order, blah, 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 blah. Why would anybody
it's about owning the libs?
I think that's
they like owning the libs more than they dislike crime.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not it's crime is an excuse. Let's call a spade a spade. If we're talking about people actually being worried about crime, they would be far more angered by the rich, powerful person who abused his wife and murdered her, like in their who cold-heartedly murdered her, as opposed to the 19-year-old Indigenous kid who sold a bag of pot without a license.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but it's not what it's about. It's not about law and order. It's about, well, I guess it's about order, not so much about law. It's not about justice. Yeah. It's about maintaining maintaining a certain order within society, and it's not about justice.
In either case.
Mo apologizes and removes Stewart from duties after the Thatcher invite. So Stewart's removal comes into effect immediately, according to a brief email from Mo's office on Monday. So just like October
31st.
Yeah. So he has apologized and removed Saskatchewan Party MLA Lyle Stewart from his legislative secretary duties after he invited convicted murderer Colin Thatcher to this fall's session launching throne speech. So, I mean, we kind of know that this means that they found out that the consequences were greater than they expected, and they actually might have to, they faced backlash from people they expected to not care or to support them.
Well, and so that's what I was trying to get at, is that, like, why would you think this is a good idea? Like, who is like, yay, convicted murderers on either side of the aisle, right? Like, on any political party, nobody's like, you know what we need? We need more wife murdering assholes in this place. Like, so how are you so not think this would backfire on you, right? Like, that's what I don't understand.
I'm surprised it backfired on them. I'm going to be honest. I'm surprised it backfired.
For lots of things, yeah. If it was somebody that had, said some racist things in the past, but it's like convicted murderer, right? Not, he had some financial issues. That's not white collar crime. They're totally fine with white collar crime. This dude straight up murdered somebody, right?
Yeah. Conservatives
don't like that. The people that murder people are bad, even in the conservative mindset.
I don't. Again, you have more faith in Saskatchewan than I do.
I think that I know a lot of conservatives, that people that vote conservative, that really in their hearts aren't conservatives, but just can't identify themselves as anything but. That those people, they are good people, and they think of themselves as conservative, but still would have a problem with this. There's all the folks that don't, but I think still the vast majority of Sask Party supporters are people that just aren't aware or just cannot vote for NDP or Liberal or anything, but they're just born and raised conservatives, and that's just the way it's going to be. They can't stomach voting for anything else, but would have a problem with convicted murderer being, a guest of honor, a special invite of one of the people in the party, right? But so it speaks to maybe that Mo and co think that the majority of the supporters are the like yellow vesting convoyer folk. No, they're just the loudest, right? But you push the envelope far enough, you're going to piss everybody off. Now it'll be forgotten. They'll still be voted in again. But I'm glad they faced some backlash enough to walk it back. But
I'm glad they did too. And that, again, it maybe speaks to we're in better shape. But like, people are really good at turning a blind eye when their team does the thing that's shitty. And I think...
Oh, exactly. Now that they've apologized, it's like, okay, they knew it was wrong. It's fine.
Yeah.
It is going to be.
That's right.
100%. I'm agreeing with you there. But,
I think they just banked on the fact that it made NDP angry was going to be more powerful than it undermining their own conscience.
The affordability checks. Not enough to address cost of living, according to the Sask opposition. With $500 checks said to be on the way, Saskatchewan residents this fall, the opposition is continuing to put pressure on the government to address affordability issues farther. I didn't even know this was still a thing. I thought we weren't getting them anymore. But because they lost the election that they announced it for. So I was sure we were done.
Yeah. November. And that's the thing. Like, this kind of thing is so just, it irks me because it costs so much money to make this happen that it's like you could have done something that actually helps people. Like, $500 in people's bank accounts will help people, but it doesn't undo the fact that you added PST to a bazillion other things. It's like, you're the one making it more expensive for us in a lot of instances. So you giving us some money, but then turning around, like, doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I for one am going to donate a large portion of my money, Moenopoly money, I've been calling it.
Just because you wanted to title the episode that. That's what
I expect it to show up like colored check paper.
Yeah.
And just be like
be like the COVID checks that Donald Trump was giving out. He's got to sign personally every single one.
Yeah, exactly. Like a gold seal or something like that. Yeah, so I'm going to donate mine to like the abortion support network that I'm part of, and just anything that would be like so anti Mo's favorite thing.
Right.
Is what's going to get my money. Just because I'm petty.
Fair. No, that's fair.
But I try to do good with my petty and spite.
Yeah, it's they Scott Moe said affordability is a concern that reaches all Canadians, and the provincial government continues to address that. Quote, that's why we move forward annually with $2 billion of affordability measures. That's why we added $450 million in this year's budget, he said. Well, we most certainly are going to continue to focus on growth that works for everyone in Saskatchewan. And here's the clincher. The NDP were in government. There was no growth, and they didn't work for anybody. because that's relevant 15 years later, right?
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Well, and what affordability measures?
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And we're going to focus on growth. Means we're going to get more subsidies for like oil and gas companies that work for everyone, but actually don't, right? Like,
that's right.
You're going to, because anything he tweets now is like, oh, we're manufacturing is up this and they're like, he just gets called out in the comments because it's like, no, actually that's not the case, or immigration is not up, it's down. Like all of the things that he highlights as being like, look at how great we are really kind of cherry picked and not important, not relevant, or just straight up false. So yeah, you're putting money into something and you're going to call it an affordability measure.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah,
I always think of like the idea, like he says they added $450 million to this year's budget, but like healthcare still is underfunded. Education is underfunded. Like many of the most important social programs are underfunded. Like, I would like to see the things that are needed get the proper amount of money to make them run well. Sask online gambling site launches. So legally regulated sports betting is now live in Saskatchewan via the internet, I guess, because we've always had sports betting. If you went to the store and filled out the whatever the fuck it's called. But now, province launched Play Now on Thursday, the first legal online gaming platform in Saskatchewan since the federal government legalized single-game sports betting in August 2021. Yeah, my initial reaction to this was, oh good, the Saskatchewan government is making it easier for addicts to destroy their lives. This is fantastic. Yeah. But also we do have a casino in Regina and casinos throughout the province and various other things that make it very easy for people to lose a lot of money via gambling.
Yeah, and my thoughts were the same, but then I remembered it's like addicts are going to do what they need to do to be addicted to things. Like, I have family that struggles with alcoholism. They can go anywhere and get what they need, right? They need. And thankfully they've been sober for a long time now. But so I tend to think of it as, I hate that this stuff exists because it does make addiction worse. But at the same time, what are you going to,
yeah.
Prohibiting it doesn't stop it from happening. Like the whole point about like legalizing weed or or decriminalizing drugs, it's kind of that same mentality that people are going to do it. Addiction is a real issue.
Yep.
Let's at least try to make it as safe as possible. Now, gambling, like it says here, they have, 24-hour,
Addiction support.
advisors available at all hours of the day. So it's like, oh, so we have like addiction and mental health 24-hour advisors? Oh no, just on the gambling platform. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was kind of like they're trying to do it in the best way possible, but it's still like a shitty thing that it exists at all. But if there's going to be shitty things, at least we can make revenue on it that will hopefully help. But like, I have such little faith in the provincial government that it's like, theoretically, like in my point of view, cigarettes shouldn't exist. They're just cause cancer. They're not good for anybody. They're
cigarettes
addictive.
should exist less than gambling should exist.
Well, either way, yeah, I get. But it's like, but if it's going to exist, I want it to be taxed heavily, and I want those taxes to go to lung cancer research and air quality measures and stuff like that. Does it? Probably not. I'm sure it just goes into one big pot.
Yep.
But if I ran things, it's like, okay, all of these things exist. People are going to do them anyways. Let's make it easier, or not easier, but easier to get in a safe way rather than out on the streets, whatever the case may be. We'll tax it and put that money back into helping people break that addiction and or dealing with the downstream health effects of that addiction, right? Put it into healthcare to help people with cirrhosis and lung cancer and whatever else.
Yeah.
Clearly, that's not going to be what happens here. It's just going to make money and people are just going to get more addicted.
Yeah.
So, do I like it?
It's a
or
safe
not like
consumption
it?
site. Like it's at the end of the day, it's a safe consumption site. That said, the revenue will be slightly different than just like taxes on cigarettes, because it goes to SIGA rather than to the provincial government itself. So,
and that was another thing that
Saskatchewan
made me feel, a little bit like, oh, okay, I'm a little bit more better with this than just straight on a government money scheme.
It's harm reduction. Like it's providing a addictive thing in a safer environment. Again, just like a safe consumption site. And ideally you focus again on harm reduction. And like we've talked about with drugs and alcohol before, it's the studies tend to indicate that addiction is less about the access to the item itself and more about the social conditions that surround it. The best way of fighting gambling addiction is creating a better society as a whole, rather than trying to restrict access to the addictive substance or addictive activity in this case. So the taxing part of it is always, I guess, somewhat challenging when you are someone who is more progressive and does believe in the good government can do, when it's a bad government in place. Because in general, I'm not opposed to higher taxes that pay for social programs and pay for, like we talked about in the last segment, this is a provincial government that added PST on a bunch of things. Like, were the money being spent by a government that I trust and support, I would be very glad there's taxes on rider tickets. Rider tickets are a luxury good. I am glad there are taxes on luxury goods.
On insurance, children's clothing, stuff like that.
Yeah. One of the ones that got the biggest fee was that tickets and whatnot. You're right. Like taxes should be more progressive, so we need to be careful on what we're taxing. We want to make sure we're taxing it in a fair and effective way. But
sales tax do disproportionately affect lower income.
100%.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that was my other issue, right? Is like, yes, it's on rider games and stuff like that. But my husband and I went to a Pats game last night for our date night because there was no movies we wanted to see. And it was really expensive. And we're like, we saw some kids there and they were dancing. I'm like, my kid would really like this, but it's not going to be something. And like we are pretty privileged. We're both well employed and things like that. We could afford to take our kid, but it just made me sad that it's not going to be something that's going to be accessible for most families because it's exorbitantly expensive, as are writer games now, so it was kind of, I agree, but like tax my income, maybe
Yes.
more, tax my home, my property taxes, tax the things, tax the wealthy, just tax I can't afford the
tax my privilege.
But it was like they didn't increase the percentage of the sales tax. Like, so the things that were already being taxed weren't being taxed more. Like it was expanding it. Now, some of the stuff they expanded it to, yeah, absolutely, they shouldn't have. But some of the things that have been the biggest splash as far as, I think, possible actual damage to this Ask Party was the taxing rider games. I think that was, I've heard even conservatives get angry at that one, and that one was a big political mistake. And part of me sitting there going, yeah, no, of all the things they added added PST to,
that's the one.
Yeah, I'm good with rider games being taxed, and I like going to rider games. It's a thing I enjoy. It's still a luxury good. So if you're going to have a regressive tax like a provincial sales tax, I'm fine having it on luxuries. And going back to the gambling revenue thing, like, if this exact same website was launched while an NDP government was in power, I'd probably be a lot more bullish on it. Like, I'd be more positive for it. And again, I know that's my bias is coming through, going full circle here, right to the very first. We all have biases, and I know that's mine. And I think part of it is, I don't trust this provincial government to spend that tax revenue in an effective way. I see it as an excuse to reduce taxes on people who probably should be paying their fair share, as opposed to greater taxes on addicts.
I just dislike that this is exactly like you said, a safe consumption site, harm reduction. But the SAS Party is typically anti that when it comes to that, like, gambling and alcohol are okay addictions, right? But anything else is bad, and so we're not going to help those people that have those addictions. We'll only help these people that have these addictions, right? So it's
and that's utter bullshit. Anyone who supports this, I don't want to hear them bitching and moaning about safe consumption sites for other addictive substances. We should be treating addictions like a healthcare concern and a social concern, not a criminal concern.
I find, like, I think of gambling as a more exploitative type of addiction, like, because it's promoted and it specifically feeds money into, not in Saskatchewan because it's the government, but if you look at Vegas, that money is filtered up to very, very wealthy companies who have people who study gaming and study addiction and specifically design these machines to make the increase of the addiction increased. And it's very, gambling is I don't know. It's hardcore.
I have some bad news to tell you, Cory, about alcohol and drugs and tobacco.
Alcohol and tobacco for sure too. Yeah.
I would. There's still billionaires at the top of the food chain when it comes to illegal drugs too.
That's true. Yeah, I mean,
it's different types of billionaires, but even then, not completely.
That's true.
So, it's not like they are nicer people at the head of drug cartels, or at the head of the pharmaceutical companies that have things accidentally fall off the back of trucks and end up in the criminal markets.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and alcohol is glamorized and such a huge part of our social fabric of our society that it's again,
particularly in Saskatchewan, actually.
Driving while intoxicated.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't cover it during the throne speech portion, but there is a push now to legalize drinking in certain areas of the park, of various parks. That is now, I don't know, I guess something the provincial government is interested in. So,
yeah, I'm good with it. Again, I don't like my governments being the arbiters of enforcing Christian morality.
Yeah.
Like most of our temperance laws come from ultra right-wing Christian evangelical religious zealots from the 1920s, right? Like that's
Absolutely.
a lot of where our alcohol laws come from. I am very fine with the religious zealots from 100 years ago not dictating where I can have a glass of wine.
Yeah, I'm glad you can't like smoke in public places because that affects people.
That affects other people.
100%. 100%.
Like somebody sitting on a park bench, sucking back a bottle of wine, I really don't care as long as they don't get in the car and drive away. But they could do that from their house or from the bar, right?
100%.
So it's no different.
You're not.
I think that's it's for the provincial government to be on board with that. Again, it seems kind of counterintuitive because I see them as this like puritanical, but also, not at all in some way. So they're fine with booze,
if it suits their needs, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about this before on the show too. There's this weird dichotomy within the conservative movement where you have the, quote unquote libertarians and the social conservatives who are trying to fit under the same tent and are at odds with each other. What was it, 8-10 years ago or whenever, when they temporarily loosened some of the restrictions on stripping for like a year, and then all of a sudden they like re-implemented them again because one wing of the party fought with the other wing. It was, we want to allow people to be able to do this. It's a free market. Oh, wait, no, we can't have boobies and beer.
Yeah.
Make it a government titty bar. And it's a source of revenue.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Appeal to the capitalist in the.
Well, really, right? Like, truthfully, though, if you want to make money, and you want growth and you want new businesses and stuff like that, it's like, let them in, tax them like crazy, and you've got extra money, right? Sell the licenses. You set up a regulatory agency. There's a bunch of jobs that are going in there, like health inspectors, everything else, making sure the staff are treated appropriately and yada, yada, yada. Just creating jobs is what they say they want to do, right? Growth, all of that. Not if it involves boobies. Boobies are bad.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess we'll end it there. Before we go, I want to mention I'm terrible at promoting the show. If any viewer wants to share it around and tell people that might be of a similar political persuasion as us, you might enjoy our takes on things. Maybe you won't. That's fine. But if you like it, make sure to give it that like thing on the YouTubes and share it around with everybody.
On the YouTubes, eh?
That's right.
We're showing our age.
Yeah. And otherwise, you can find us at anchor.fm/frommanypeoples. Our Twitter is at skpoliticspod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/frommanypeoplestrengthpod. All the show notes, including articles that we don't get to, will be at skepticalleftist.com. And our email is frommanypeoples@gmail.com. Or if you would like to buy us a coffee, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/frommanypeoples. Thank you, David, and thank you, Sarah, for joining me this evening.
Thanks, Cory.